We are seeing a heightened awareness of water around us. The limitations of centralized water and sanitation systems are becoming increasingly obvious, and so we're seeing a renewed interest in decentralized approaches to enhance our water security. In today's conversation, we will cover decentralized and non-utility scale significance in South Africa's water and sanitation future. We'll also find out what technologies we can embrace for a sustainable future with enough water to meet our needs. Don't go away, we will be right back. The South African Water Chamber was established to form a credible, strong link between an organized private sector and government. Welcome. You are watching the Water Hour. I'm your host, Brigitte Limbanda from Cape Town in South Africa, and the stream is brought to you by BeLive Media and the South African Water Chamber. This is an audience-centric show, so please just know that you are very welcome to participate in the conversation. If you have any statements or questions about our topic for today, then please feel free. We are watching the comments. Participate. Our panel today comprises of the South African Water Chamber, and that is made up of Dr. Anthony Turton, Fred Platt, and Benoit Leroy. And then our special guest today is Herman Smit. He's the Managing Director of Quality Filtration Systems, and they built the very first MEMCOR microfiltration system in South Africa. But we will ask him more about what exactly it is they do. So let's welcome them onto the screen. Benoit, we will start with you just to give a brief introduction of the South African Water Chamber and opportunities that are open to members.
Thank you, Brigitte, and welcome to our guests, and a special welcome to Herman Smit from QFS, one of our first members, and really looking forward to our members letting us show off a bit of what they're doing, and also to have a look at the many silver bullets I believe we have between centralized and decentralized, and obviously the very hot topic being desalination. So we're technology agnostic in the South African Water Chamber, and but we're really fascinated by the amount of various technologies being integrated in ways that were not so obvious to us before, but are becoming more and more obvious. And by plugging in renewable energy, for example, we're able to actually get some very cost-effective, reliable water decoupled, from rain and climate change and all those other risks. So, in the Water Chamber, we're the water supply chain for infrastructure development in water and sanitation aggregator, association, and chamber. And we believe that we have some major progress that's been made in the last year. More to come next year with the National Infrastructure Plan 2050, which is really our water Bible at the moment that we're holding on very tightly. We just need to ensure that it gets gazetted very early in the year. And I think we're already starting to see there's been quite a lot of activity in the last quarter or so in the water sector. And I think we're going to see some good activity coming forward. So there's a lot of hope from that perspective. And I think Herman will be able to share with us that he certainly is not coming from an angle of doom and gloom, in that he has a vibrant business. And I think, I'm really looking forward to sharing some of the experiences. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that introduction with regards to the South African Water Chamber. Fred, if we could just ask you to introduce yourself to the audience, that would be great.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon and welcome, Herman. Fred Platt from the South African Water Chamber. Been involved in water, and I suppose to some degree been an activist for the water sector, because fundamentally water is the ultimate economic enabler, and we understand that unless we address the water problem in this country, and we use that as a catalyst for change and for driving the economy, all our other plans are really subjugated to the premise, or based on the premise, that we will get the water sector going, and that remains our commitment, both from the water chamber and as individuals.
Thanks very much, Fred. Anthony, if I can ask you to just briefly introduce yourself to the audience who doesn't. Most people know you, but just for the benefit of those who don't, if you could just give a brief introduction, please.
Good afternoon, Brigitte, and to the listeners. Yes, I'm a founding member of the SA Water Chamber. The position that I come from is quite a simple one. I'm on record as saying that we don't actually have a water crisis. We rather have a crisis of critical thinking. So depending on which perspective you come from, the water sector is either a doom and gloom place, or it's a place of enormous optimism. And the reason why it's a place of enormous optimism, in my professional opinion, is the fact that we are transitioning now into a whole new way of thinking about things. In other words, our crisis of critical thinking is now starting to be challenged by the chamber. And we will actually start moving into a water abundant future as we start seeing the convergence of technologies, of really good ideas and capital coming to the market, because water, besides being an economic enabler, is also an infinitely renewable resource. And we are at the very cusp right now where your desalination type of technologies are starting to come to a cost level where they are challenging, or a realistic challenge, for surface water development. So that's why I'm very keen to listen to what the offering is today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and a very special welcome to the broadcast, Herman. So you are the Managing Director of Quality Filtration Systems with a background in microbiology. Tell us a little bit about QFS, just to kick off the conversation.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks very much for the SA Water Chamber for this opportunity to spread the water news. And QFS was formed in 1996. And from the start, we focused on bringing in world-leading membrane technology, looking at what is water treatment going to be in future. And we can clearly see now, with all the augmentation being done through desalination and reuse, that it's changing into almost like a process plant where you need chemical engineers and mechanical engineers instead of big civil components. So we've always read it ourselves, and we've been trying to be innovative. I like the word disruptive, but it's not always disruptive. I think it's just taking what works internationally and implement it locally with local knowledge and local skills to make sure that we have a sustainable solution for future. And QFS have been instrumental in putting in some of the firsts in South Africa, like being involved in the very first direct reuse plant in the country, and and we've just installed our fourth reuse plant for municipal water. So we've always been involved in developing technologies, but very importantly, making sure that we can design and install it locally, that we can create a sustainable solution, and investing in people, investing in engineering that gives us a South African solution for a South African problem.
Thanks very much for that introduction, Herman. So our conversation today is around water reuse and desalination. Um, Anthony, I'm going to start with you. Can you just give us an overview of why water reuse and a mix of reuse and desalination is so important for water and food security in South Africa?
Yes, Brigitte, the simple reality is that in 2002, with the first National Water Resource Strategy, which is the formal document mandated by the National Water Act, it was determined with the highest level of scientific accuracy we've ever managed to achieve in South Africa that we had reached 98% allocation of all our national water resources, with some river basins having been over allocated by 120%. Now, that is a simple fact. And if you drill down into those numbers, you'll see that, for example, the total volume of all the water in all our dams is 38 billion cubic meters. But we require, for full economic development and full job creation, by 2035, around about then, we require about 62 to 63 billion cubic meters of water. This is our actual fundamental constraint. So where are we going to get that from? Are we going to build long pipelines up to the Zambezi River to get water that we don't have a legal right to? Well, that's one option, I guess. The other option is to simply start recycling and reusing. And if we look at the recycling and the desalination, and we combine it with another problem that I'll talk about, we don't really have a water problem. We actually have a salt problem. We live on a planet that is 2/3 water, but the water happens to have salt in it. Now that's why I say we have a crisis of critical thinking. So if you look at the size of the market in South Africa for what is called the creation of new water, it is around about 25 billion cubic meters between now and 2035. That is 2/3 the volume of all the water in all of our dams built at national level. That is the size of the water reuse market. It's a substantial market. And this has to be brought to market in a very, very short time frame, in the next decade. So in other words, while it's taken us decades to build all the dams we have to generate 2/3 of that volume in the next decade or so. So in other words, it's the one sector or the one sub-sector of the water sector that is likely to see enormous economic growth and investment opportunity in the decade ahead. And that is why it's important, because no coastal city in South Africa, from Richards Bay to Cape Town, can continue to grow or create a full employment for its local residents simply because of water constraints. All the water that they need has already been sucked dry by inland water users, and yet they're all on oceans. So water is actually not a constraint, it's only a constraint if you think about it as the business as usual. So that's it. So today you're going to hear about the significant market size and first steps into starting to fill that market.
Thanks very much for that, Anthony. Herman, I'd like to switch to you. You know, there's been so much misinformation with regards to desalination, especially in Cape Town and in South Africa. Now, you specialize in membrane-based technology for drinking water and filtration. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because, you know, there's just this ongoing sort of anti-desalination into the mix. So can you speak a little bit to that?
Brigitte, I think there's let's be honest, there is some glaring problems that desalination's facing, and electricity being the biggest one. And there's a lot of issues that's related to operating costs and all that type of thing. And I think it's an unfair assessment, because desalination is really getting more affordable in terms of energy consumption, in terms of operating costs and all that type of thing. And I know it's not the only answer, but we always look at one technology and we say, well, desalination's bad because it does that. But we're really looking at an integrated approach and saying desalination will play a role in water security. And absolutely agree with Anthony regarding reuse, and we're pushing reuse quite a bit, and that forms part of the solution to make desalination affordable. And let me explain a little. It doesn't sound like it sounds like it's competing, but I think the big drive is to say, how do we integrate the different technologies to be available for us to provide water security? And we've been so passionate about it to say the coastal towns have a limitation on electricity. How do we get past that? And we trademarked a thing called the Coastal Drought Buster, just to promote the remix of wastewater and desalination. And it's incredible now that we're installing our first plant with that technology, and we've seen the big benefit now in hindsight, showing the value engineering that we did before the project to show the municipality the limitation that they have, not only about electrical cost, but also about electrical availability. If you're going to put all your eggs in one basket, then it's not going to work. In 2 years, we've installed 3 desalination plants, smaller plants, between 1 and 3 megaliters a day, and not one of them had did not have an electrical problem. We had to find additional electricity. So I think that's where the negativity comes from. But I think we can solve that by saying that is a part, and we need that when there's really no water, but it is expensive water. But have that as part of your toolkit that you can use. And then I think if you use that in combination and you see that integrated approach between surface water and groundwater and desalination and reuse, that's quite important. And just to give an example, and it's not applicable to every single town, but our solution works really well by having a 65-35% blend at the moment between reuse and desalination, which makes the electrical cost really affordable for a solution.
Thanks very much for explaining that and helping us to sort of demystify that a little bit. It's an ongoing thing, and I think it's important that in every broadcast we just talk a little bit about desalination and its value into the mix. Benoit, can I ask you to just kick off the conversation with regards to centralization and decentralization options with regards to water security and why that's important?
Just to follow on very quickly on what Herman was saying on the energy side. So 20 years ago, we're using 10 to 12 kilowatt hours per cubic meter to desalinate seawater, and now we're using 2.5. The older plants maybe 4, and that's through membrane, so not thermal. So we've reduced the energy input into reverse osmosis membranes. But not only that, is with renewable energy, we now, the cheapest plants in the world being built in the Middle East is just over 4.05 rand per cubic meter, which we cannot produce with surface water in South Africa as a rule. Our water varies between 6 and 8 rand up to 14, 15 rand. So it's a combination of reducing the energy footprint, but also using renewables, because renewables it seems like infinitely renewable in their price discounts. So that technology is really helping us. So taking it from there is the focus is really for big plants, and big plants take something like 7 to 10 years to actually go through the entire planning to implementation. And big plants, you're talking 50 megaliters and up a day, so 50 million liters and up. And typically in the Middle East, the plants are running at 200 to 400 megaliters a day. So half of Cape Town, for example. So they're pretty big. But now Egypt just announced a couple of months ago, they're putting 27 plants, and they're going to be between the 30 to 50 megaliters a day. They take a bit of time to plan and engineer and implement. But what we're forgetting is that we've got a lot of towns that have 20,000, 40,000, 80,000 people, who don't need a utility scale size plant. And in actual fact, a lot of those towns are the ones that rely on tourism, for example. And in the peak periods, they just don't have water, particularly in the Eastern Cape and the Western Cape. And that's where the sort of 1 to 5 megaliter a day plant, be it reuse, desalination, combination, really fits in. Now, to do those plants, generally speaking, and Herman can let us know, but in my mind, they take around about a year, maybe 18 months at a push if they are complicated situation. But they can be rolled out a lot quicker, and in actual fact can help sustain the local economy, where water is a deciding factor. So, maybe we've got 50 or 55%, maybe 60% of our population in South Africa is so-called urbanized. But, a lot of the urban is very small. So outside of the metros, we really, and that's where I think a lot of the water security issues lie, is that's where we need to get rapid rollout so that we can, in a modular fashion, so we don't have to go big bang, and that can be done very quickly. And maybe Herman, if you can elaborate. I think the Port Alfred one is a nice combination of reuse and desalination, but I think also in a particularly hard hit area from a drought perspective, and maybe talk to us about sort of from concept through to tenders and procurement and to commissioning, what the sort of time frame was, so we can contrast it for our listeners, as opposed to a utility scale where Cape Town, we know, who are sort of first with a 50 to 75 megaliter day plant, are talking 7 to 8 years, and that's the high road. I believe it's going to be 10 years.
Well, no, yeah, absolutely. And obviously I'm going to sidestep all the contractual and political stuff, because we try and clean water and all those, all that is also problems that you have to overcome, and you have to jump into this with both feet and be willing to go the extra mile if you want to do this. And that's on. I'm saying, I'm just mentioning that I'm not going to discuss those. I'm going to focus on the technical aspects, and we absolutely have done quite a bit of decentralized plants. And I'll give you an example. And I love this concept about how quick can you perform, because and I'd love to get into a project which is not an emergency these days in South Africa. So I wish I had 12 months to construct a 5 megaliter, but usually we only have 5 or 6 months. It's always an emergency. So we have to be ready to from concept to first water is around about 6 months for about a 5 mega. One of the plants about 2 years ago to upgrade with 1 megaliter per day, and we only had 7 weeks to construct that. So it's we can, if it's only a skid upgrade, do that quite quickly. But the project at Port Alfred's a very good example where it's a full decentralized plant, and it is multi-complex, and there's 19 40-foot containers on this plant that has to be integrated, and there's obviously different process streams and all that type of thing. So you can deploy quickly because it can be manufactured and factory acceptance tested onto site, and you can create a solution quite quickly. What the big benefit for us is that usually on these mega projects where people are waiting for the process of tendering and the process of construction, we see turnarounds between 4 to 6, 7, even 7 years. And it sometimes fails in this process because there's always some funding problems, etc., changes of politics. The decentralized plants gets pushed through quite quickly, and I think the risk is lower. And I like your reference to renewables, because this is what we're punting to a lot of our clients. And renewables and decentralization really goes hand in hand, because with the plants that we put into place now, we have a renewable package, which is not that difficult to deploy there. And people always think that you have to put the renewable package right next to the plant. We have a plant at the moment, which we are engineering, where our renewable package is 40 kilometers away. Because we're using the grid as storage. So where it's in an area where it's flatter, where there's more sun, because next to the ocean it might be a problem. So that combination is great. So we have packages which from 250 cubic meters per day up to 2 megaliters per day desalination, that we can put a renewable package together that can also be implemented in the 6 months that we construct. So I like the quick deployment, quick turnaround, and contractually. What's really beneficial for me is when we install this, immediately takes pressure off the centralized plants. Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to replace the centralized plants, but you can immediately see how the big reservoir starts filling up again, and we're just giving them breathing space so that they can go into the mega projects and have the time to execute properly.
Thanks very much for that, Herman. Anthony, if I can just ask you if you can talk a little bit about the technology that we've got at our disposal in South Africa, and the ability to quickly implement, as Herman just said. We've come a long way in terms of technology, and just to brag a little bit about what we've got available in South Africa and why we can implement so quickly.
MDB.
Yes.
Yes, I think, okay, South Africa has always been a remarkable country from an engineering perspective. You know, we come up, we're also grey-haired kind of people. I see Herman has got less grey hairs than I have, but, we come from an era where there was a very high premium placed on science, engineering, and technology. And South Africa has developed a formidable reputation globally for producing some really innovative engineers. And, in my own company, we make extensive use of that, where we are literally producing world-class solutions, with South African engineers. So I think part of it is just the mindset that South Africa has, and coming out of the political and social milieu in which we've operated for the majority of our lives. There's been a lot of pressure. We've had to do things very quickly. At a very young age, people have taken on an enormous amount of responsibilities. And our ability to stitch together teams and solutions. So South Africa has got, very, very high level of credibility still to this day when dealing with any overseas people. And here we're going to see the example here as well. Because we are less sort of risk, or you're more risk. We have that's the word I'm looking for. We have a better appetite for risk than the average water sector professional out there has. Therefore, we are able to put together these significant solutions very quickly. And in fact, what we're going to start seeing is a convergence of the water and energy spaces, because one of the big problems with the renewable energy is how do you actually store the energy, because there's a mismatch between the peak production period of energy, whether it's solar or wind. It doesn't always happen at the same time in the same place, and it's generally out of sync with the demand. So solar, the peak demand is at night time, and yet the sun's down at night time. So storage has always been a problem. And what I predict we're likely to do, I'm a guy that's not afraid of making predictions about the future. What I think we're going to start seeing now is the use of very creative energy solutions to create desalination processes that are also capable of generating hydrogen. So the use of hydrogen as a storage for energy. And of course, now we start getting into really cutting edge business models, because if you had to convert just a portion of your RO plant to the production of hydrogen, then you start cross-subsidizing the production of your potable water, and that fundamentally changes the economics. So in other words, we're getting into a scenario in South Africa where the reality on the ground is driving the way that engineers and scientists and technology providers think, and that reality on the ground is simply going to bypass all of the political constraints that we currently have, because reality will ultimately be the determinant of what needs to be done, when, where, why, and how.
Thanks very much for that, Anthony. And Fred, I see you smiling there. Can I switch to you for a comment?
Yeah, I think what Tony is saying is so correct and so on point. The fundamental problem that we have within the water sector is that we view it as a cost. And while we view it as a cost, it remains a problem. It's the same way as we look at water being scarce, as opposed to understanding it's an infinitely renewable resource. So when you view it as a cost, so if we look at a dysfunctional sewage works, we see that we don't have enough money to treat that. But when we look at it as a resource and an opportunity, then all of a sudden we see that there's a number of resources. There's water, there's energy, there's chemicals, there's whatever the case may be. So the mindset, and we've had a very, very dualistic mindset, both in terms of the water sector being a problem, and also how we fund it, and how we manage these challenges. And when we start opening it up, and we apply the ingenuity that we have as a nation, and we go back to being the innovators that we've been, then all of a sudden the water sector provides an incredible opportunity for renewal in terms of the economy, and it becomes a catalyst for growth, as opposed to the cost burden that we view the current problem as.
That's a very good point that you make there. And Benoit, if I can switch to you for a comment.
Sure. To me, renewable energy, renewable water really fit into the narrative so nicely today. And, a couple of years ago, talking around about green hydrogen, and, sort of get asked, are you on this earth or another earth, etc. Well, the news is that we're going to unlock so many reuse projects through green hydrogen. We're going to need new competitors in the market. There's so much work there. And the appetite for hydrogen, especially green hydrogen, from the petrochem industry switching, from the heavy mining switching to green hydrogen. And now we see fleets of cargo ships being converted to green hydrogen. And this week was the first flight that I think it was United Airlines. It was a fully renewable avgas. So the avgas was produced not with grey or brown hydrogen, but with green hydrogen. So it's still fossil fuel based, but it's a transition fuel. Where do we get green hydrogen from? There's only one place you can get it from, and it's from water. It's H2O, and you take those H's out, and they have got something like 3 to 4 times the energy that liquid fuels have got. So we have something that is incredibly valuable. The technology is very old. We're using 40, 50-year-old technology here, so it's nothing new. From that perspective, it's the way it's being packaged and the way the demand we've got in the market, but coupled with renewable energy. So we've got renewable energy, which is a third of the price of coal or nuclear energy for new plants, that is driving the electrolysis to get the hydrogen out. And what that hydrogen also does now, it becomes a battery too that we can use for, as Tony was talking, for at nighttime and the likes. But there's another one that we need to not forget, is the brine economy. And I know Tony can talk about this for a couple of weeks to start off with. And in the brine economy, so instead of sending the brine back into the sea, which is the natural water cycle, is the salt that's in there. There's some valuable salts that we need in electronics and the likes, but also we can store energy in molten salt. So watch the space. That's going to happen very quickly. So what we see as problems are in actual fact opportunities within the water cycle. And in a nutshell, to me, this is all biomimicry. All we are doing is we're mimicking what is done by the natural biology on Earth. And Herman is the biologist. I'm not. So I'm just picking up on these things. And desalination is biomimicry 101. If you look at the water cycle, and I wish the naysayers would learn this in standard 1, so grade 3, because that's what it is. And the energy story we've spoken about. So yes, renewable water, renewable resources, renewable energy. We're just doing what nature does, but I think we've become a lot smarter, and we're doing things a lot quicker. And in South Africa, we've had to be, because we haven't always had water. It's been in the wrong places. We had gold where there's not enough water. Now we've got gold mines closed and there's too much water. There's decanting. It's not a problem. It's a resource. Okay. So yeah, I think, but we also had a time in space where all of these technologies that exist for a long time are actually maturing, and we're able to mass produce and miniaturize technologies that we couldn't before, because my whole life is on this mobile cell phone. Okay. And if you told me 20 or 25 years ago that it would be like that, I'd say, I don't believe in Nostradamus. Well, sometimes we have to rethink it. So I think we really don't know what we don't know, but we have the ideal opportunity. And we've seen in the pandemic that we've been able to take what existed for 20 years and from that develop a vaccine in a couple of months out of technology that was sitting there waiting. It was for cancer and likes, this mRNA, and here we are, and we've got it, and it works. I don't want to go down that too much, but we have the technology. We seem to be getting better political will. There's a new mood in the country, okay? And in South Africa, we definitely have the wherewithal, but the globe's a small place, so we know where to find people. We'll be short of resources and all the likes. We'll be able to localize. So to me, we're at the cusp of quite a new dawn, but being a water person, I would really love water to be our Marshall Plan for the recovery of South Africa post-pandemic, and through the industrialization master plan that the Water Chamber is working with the DTIC, is that a lot of the stuff that we import, we onboard it to South Africa and we supply sub-Saharan Africa as we used to do, and it's at the Southern Hemisphere. So there's opportunities for new industrialists, entrepreneurs, and the likes. And it has to be pulled by demand. And the demand is going to be in some utility scale plants and a lot of decentralized plants. And how we mix the two together and complement each other is really quite interesting to me. I still want to hear a bit more from Herman on, the Port Alfred project where we're mixing reuse and desalination. We mustn't forget that one, please.
Yeah, Herman, happy to switch over to you. So, just to expand a little bit on that. And then I just also want to, everyone's talking about greening the, green energy, and, people still have this misconception that desalination harms the planet, but the science doesn't lie. So if you can just comment on that again. I know that Anthony has said a lot about it, but maybe you can just corroborate some of that.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I just want to pick up on two aspects before I get into the whole remix, and we've been advocating a lot what Fred was saying to people. Say, yes, the last place they spend water is on the wastewater plant because it only costs money. There's nothing. It's a source. If you're going to reuse the water, it's valuable. There's waste to energy projects that can be utilized also to help that financial model. But if you see, even grey water actually provides a very good income out of that. So then you will start looking at your wastewater usage. And and Tony's right. We've got so much knowledge in South Africa, and we are tapping into a network. Unfortunately, it's very fragmented knowledge base that's in South Africa, but people that are willing to work together are changing the way, and it's making really a big difference. So if we find a common goal that we want to create a solution in South Africa, and we can do whatever is done internationally, we can do here. And we've been instrumental in making sure that we localize whatever we do here in South Africa. And it's taken some time, and there's a lot of technology transfer over the years that's happened. But we've been able in the last few years, and on every single project, to localize more than 70% of the projects. And that's a huge thing to do, to say, well, we're not dependent on COVID or exchange rates to keep the plants running, and to invest in the communities. At the moment, we have 11 interns on the Port Alfred plant, which we're there, and we have a 3-year program with them to teach them about membranes and reuse and all that type of thing, and hopefully they become the advocates for us, and also the knowledge people that can run the plants. That's going to be, because I agree with Benoit, the amount of decentralized reuse plants are going to exponentially increase in the next few years. Yeah, the technology about remix, and there's quite a few plants internationally that's there or not there. And a lot of the time, I look at some of the remix plants, which I think they're not advocating it as remix, but it's almost remix de facto because of the quality of the of the source waters. But the remix technology means from our side is how do you incorporate the wastewater and the desalination in an affordable way, because price obviously plays a big role. And internally, there's quite a bit of IP and some R&D that went into getting it sweet, and there's some chemical engineering involved in that. But we are really trying to demystify this whole thing and not selling a black box but explaining to people how it works. And if you either blend in the front or at the back or in the middle, and there's some recycle streams that you do internally, and this is all incorporated in conjunction with a properly run wastewater plant. You can't reuse water from a badly operated wastewater plant. And you look around, a lot of the small towns have actually well-engineered, well-constructed wastewater plants which are available, just not operated well. So let's not forget about the wastewater plant that needs to also operate well to make this whole thing work. So when you look at the process flow diagram and how it works, it's you in essence are reducing the salinity of the water that you're treating, that you can to reduce the osmotic potential of the water, that you can desalinate water at a lower pressure. And at a lower pressure, you need less energy to do that. And if you do that, then suddenly renewable starts kicking in and say, well, yeah, now the amount of energy that we require is now low enough that we can incorporate energy. And I was talking about, yes, a desalination plant runs just over 5. One of our most cost effective, about 4 kilowatt hours per cubic meter, but doing you run one
Herman, I think we've got a bit of an issue there with the internet. So maybe if you could just come back into the studio again, it might fix that internet problem. And while we're waiting for Herman to return, I think he's just lost his internet signal there. So Herman, if you can just refresh your browser and come back in again, that'll be great. But Anthony, I think I'm going to pass on this question to you from Frank Duvenage. He's saying there's no doubt that the technology for reuse, reclamation, and desalination cost is still an issue from a private sector perspective. The major limitation is political alignment and the involvement of the government in managing the infrastructure of water supply. There are many synergies and many technologies to facilitate the synergies. The simple question is, why is it not being done at scale in South Africa, and what can we do to accelerate it? I think that's a good question for you.
Yes, by all means. I know Frank, a very, very bright young man from Stellenbosch. The simple reality is that we always want to default back to the thing about government. Oh, government must provide the solutions. Well, we've learned from the 2021 municipal elections that is changing, that the people of South Africa are now starting to demand things different from what they've become used to. And between now and the next general election, I believe we're going to go through a period of great fluidity. And what we're seeing in that period of fluidity now is the emergence at municipal level of very, very interesting new ideas about what needs to be done in order to save local economies from the fairly catastrophic process that's been unleashed upon them for the last 2 decades. So I think that is changing in a fundamental way. One need look no further than the city of Stellenbosch, that has now got a very, very ambitious development plan for the future. And that's going to become an enabler. Part of the burden is we've got to reach out to municipal executives now, because they've got to be educated to realize that they, in fact, are driving this this new model. And that new model is going to be driven by the simple reality that the fiscus no longer has the kind of capital needed, and that capital is going to be provided from local investors. And there we get into what Fred said early on about if we view water as a cost to be avoided, well, then you can't put capital in there because you're not going to get a return. But in reality, if water is an economic enabler, then you do start getting a return on that. And I'm not talking about an exorbitant return. I'm simply talking about a reasonable return on capital. Wherever you get capital from, you're going to pay some price to get access to that capital. And the financial models are coming through, showing us that this is entirely possible. So I think the simple reality on the ground is that government, certainly at central level, is becoming increasingly irrelevant in South Africa. That government at local level is now becoming a patchwork quilt of either highly empowered or more empowered or less empowered, but it's not a uniform spread across the country. And before Herman was lost there, I just want to mention that he was putting on record some very, very important costs there, very important numbers, and we lost him with the connection. So I would urge him to please repeat some of those numbers about, for example, what the kilowatt hour use is per megaliter of water produced and how this has changed, because this is really the game changer. And it's the way that water and energy comes together through the municipal structure that is now an enabler rather than a stumbling block. And we now talk more about decentralized solutions as opposed to central command and control kind of economy, which is what the ruling party has been trying to get us up to now. So all of this is in a state of rapid transition. And being the optimist that I am, I believe that we are in the right place at the right time, and that is the mission of the SA Water Chamber. You know, we are there to tie together all of those loose pieces, to give them this vision of a better future, and to start populating that vision with all the components, from the technical solution providers all the way through ultimately to the financial and capital providers, but also to empower the municipal decision makers, because in many cases, it will be them that are actually signing the offtake agreement that's needed to refurbish a wastewater treatment works into some other water recovery plant for whatever 20-year period of time, because that's what makes the business model work.
Thanks very much, Anthony and Herman. Could we switch back to you?
Yeah, sorry, I don't know exactly where you lost me, but I was comparing our best desalination plants at just over 4 rand per kilo.
Oh dear! Oh my goodness! Isn't that a pity?
This is the critical stuff that we need. We need this on record, okay? We need, when he mentions 4 rand, I mean, that's a small number, and we've got to get that on record, because Benoit's been saying that, but we need someone else to say it now as well, because this is really the game changer, okay?
Absolutely. Well, let's see if Herman is able to join. I think he is trying. He is trying, and it looks like he's back.
Want me to put? Yeah, Tony, it looks like somebody doesn't want me to put it on record here. So so our best run plants run about 4 kilowatt hours per cubic meters, and the remix plant runs at about 1.5 kilowatt hours per cubic meter, and that's the blend between 65 and 35. 65. Yeah, there's some very fancy footwork you can do to get down there, but it makes a huge difference in also the connection to renewable energies. Then and then suddenly it gets to a stage where renewable energies fit in very nicely.
if you can unmute me. But if I can summarize then. So Herman, what you're saying now is that your personal experience is that through the remix model, you've managed to reduce the energy requirement per unit of water by as much as 60%. Is that what you're saying?
I think Herman's just struggling to connect there. Let's just give him a second to see if it comes back online.
I think Herman was saying 1.5 kilowatt hour per cubic meter. So
Correct.
from 2.5. And if you look at that with renewable energy which is at 47 cents, the latest REAP, so let's say half of that, do easy maths, that is 75 cents for energy per cubic meter. And then if that's a quarter, it could be a third, but let's say it's a quarter of the total cost of the water, we talk about 3 Rand a cubic meter.
So these numbers, we need to have these numbers out in a very succinct thing, because those numbers are the game changer. Not all the wara goes around them. Those numbers are the fundamentals on which the technology and the business case comes together. And this is what the public needs to know about. And more importantly, this is what your municipal decision makers need to know about, because it's they who are going to ultimately make the decisions for any decentralized business model going forward. So we need those numbers put out in a simple table and made readily available. So I don't know who we can task to do that, but this is very important, because between all of our technology problems here now, we've got to get those numbers out.
Herman?
I just want to add to that, Tony, and this is the message that we also need to get out. That means that the water reuse is the majority of that mix. People are trying to advocate that desalination becomes the majority of that mix, but the reuse is actually which unlocks this whole lower energy. And if we and that people just easily just throw wastewater down the drain and into the ocean, and the desalination plays a role, but it's very important that the reuse takes the main center of that solution. Otherwise, you're not going to drive down the energy.
Can I respond to that, please, just by another very simple message? I mentioned at the start of this interview that we have 38 billion cubic meters of water available at a high assurance of supply in the country. That's the total volume of all the water in all the dams. And we need 63 by 2035. So if you multiply 38 by 1.6 plus minus, you get to 63 plus minus. So we have to reuse our water. The reuse of our wastewater, that is the primary goal. But if we now augment that reuse by desalination of seawater or mine water, now we go into a different space. So can we reuse our total national water resource 1.6 times by 2035? If we can do that, guess what? We are no longer a water-constrained economy. We are now a beneficiation economy, unconstrained from a water perspective. This is the core message. Okay, now if we can now add into that the coastal cities where they've got ready access to seawater, now we can make that number a little bit better, a little bit healthier. Doesn't have to be 1.6 times, but we could basically are putting in a blend of solutions because we ultimately have to reuse our total national water resource at least 1.6 times by 2035. And if we do that, the water story is an exceptionally good news one, because it's an enabler for the economy. And as an enabler for the economy, it generates transactions throughout the economy. It's got a multiplier effect. And every transaction that is generated, because it's a legal transaction, results in a tax being levied, and that starts strengthening the fiscus. And that is why government is going to ultimately come on board with this, because right now the fiscus is under severe pressure. So this is the messaging we've got to get out in this whole thing, okay? It's a very simple conceptual shift. But with that conceptual shift, there's a whole lot of knock-on effects. Now we have to deal with those things one at a time, because some environmental people now are saying, firstly, a desalination is too expensive. Well, we've just demonstrated that it's not. It's actually cheaper than surface water in some cases, and it's expensive compared to what? So that's one question on its own, and that must be clearly communicated. And then the second thing is it safe? Well, we've now got to communicate how safe it is. Is it safe compared to what? Compared to drinking partially treated sewage as we currently are in the country. So that's another important message. And then, of course, the third typical whataboutism that's thrown at the desalination industry is, oh, it's environmentally bad. But it's not environmentally bad, and we've got to explain why it's not environmentally bad. So these are the logical things, elements to an overall messaging package that we need to start crystallizing out. And this is the role of the water chamber. As we become more structured and more sophisticated, these are the key little messages that we're going to be putting out there, based on the best available science, engineering, and technology, and absolute fact, without any chance of being attacked for being spin or anything of that nature.
Thanks very much for that perspective, Anthony. And I think, South Africa has got a lot to be proud of. We're at the forefront of the technology of water reuse, and another great conversation that we should dive into at some point. But we're at the top of the hour. I can't believe the time's gone by so quickly. So can we have a quick round just to summarize? Can we start with you, Benoit? And we hope that Herman can rejoin us.
Yeah, sure. I think it's good to challenge paradigms, and there's so much fake information around. So I see one of our jobs in the chamber is actually to counter that, and we try and do it through these sessions, and also through through social media, and and go back to the NIP 2050. The Bible for going forward in our water infrastructure is there. It just needs political will to get it through cabinet. And that is what's going to open up public-private partnerships or private sector participation, talks to reuse, renewed water, and driving efficiencies through non-revenue water. Because now he's putting new water into a leaking bucket where 41% disappears. So I think it's really, really exciting times, and really like to thank Herman for joining us, and looking forward to more members joining us and also discussing their progress. Thank you.
Herman, while we've got you online, can we ask you just to give your brief summary of today's conversation?
No, I think thanks very much, and I think also thanks very much for pushing the reuse thing, and yes, we do desalination, but I think I concur with Tony. Reuse is definitely going to be very important. But I also want to just emphasize that when we look at availability and cost of water, decentralization also improves the cost of water, because we don't have to do the whole network issues, and we lose a lot of water through failing infrastructure. So decentralization actually lowers the cost per cubic meter as well. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Herman. Fred, if we may switch to you.
Yeah, I think Tony started off by saying it's a matter of our critical thinking and how we address the issues. I think it's very important to understand that it's not one or the other. It's not, the argument is not should there be desalination as opposed to everything else. It's a question of this entire mix. How do we go about it? How do we put something together that makes the best economic sense? It's also about the hierarchy. The first thing is, Herman spoke about the leaking infrastructure. You don't put water into a leaking bucket. So we need to understand that. We need to address the leaking infrastructure as the first priority. The next one is to look at how we use water. And it's a mindset about water being not, as Tony says, a stock that we dispose of, but rather as a resource and an infinitely renewable one. And then we look at the alternative sources of water, whether it be surface, ground, or desalination, or AMD, whatever it is, to look at this total water plan. And decentralization, at the end of the day, as Herman says, is a critical component. I think we can learn a lot from the energy sector in terms of the process that they've been through, not only in terms of the fact that there's a lot of decentralization that takes place globally in the energy sector, but also in terms of these mega projects take time, and what are we doing tomorrow, and what can we do to start changing the narrative, to start changing the outcomes, start changing the lives of the people, and start impacting the economy positively.
Thanks very much for that, Fred. And Anthony, if we can finish with you.
I can't get the last word. Thank you very much. I like to end on a positive note. So I'm going to just mention three things that I think are very positive at this moment in time about South Africa. Point number one, it was the ruling African National Congress who pioneered the most successful water recovery plant in Durban South, where they recover water from sewage to provide processed water for the Sapref refinery and for the Mondi Sapi paper mill. So we already have a success story of this, and we need them to claim bragging rights for that and start replicating that elsewhere. The second thing that I would like to say from a good news South African story is we South African scientists were the first to describe the Omicron variant of the COVID-19 virus. That has created a worldwide impact, initially seen as a disaster, but ultimately we've worked our way through that. And if you watch what's happened to the Dow, it dropped by 2,000 points, and now it's climbing up again. Okay, so we were on top of the curve. We were ahead of the curve on that thing. But the third point that I want to mention now, right now, as a thing of enormous optimism, is that we need to put out messages that are conducive to investor confidence if we want to create jobs. We need to create jobs, and we need to get investors confident. So just this week, there was a vote on expropriation without compensation that failed to make it through Parliament. In other words, that is a critical, that has been one of the big constraints over the last period of time, year or two or three, about this whole fear of South Africa as a safe investment destination. So these are three very good news things that have happened in the last week, and they all have got a South African flavor to it, and they all tell us that we must continue doing what we are already doing in the chamber, and we must pioneer this remix, reuse, recycle, this integration of technologies, water and energy, exactly what we've been talking about today, and start bringing about this decentralized solution, because that is the way that South Africa is going to go. And that, I'm afraid to say, is a fundamentally good news story.
I believe that's an excellent note on which to round up this conversation. If you were watching live, thank you to everyone who participated in the conversation today and those who commented. Please do so. The purpose is to make it as interactive as possible, to share information. So thank you very much to everyone who has reached out and commented. We do welcome that. And if anyone else would like to participate in these conversations in the way that Herman has done today, Herman, again, to yourself and QFS, a huge big thank you for participating today. So please reach out to Benoit, I believe is the contact person to reach out to if you would like to have an opportunity to appear in these conversations with us. So with that, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and we will see you on the next broadcast.